This is Podco Media Networks.
On episode 159 of Confessions of a Marketer, Ageless Creativity. Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. This time, I have a really important discussion with Ian David on ageism in advertising and marketing and his collective called Fearless. Next time, Naira Perez on Instagram Stories. And coming soon, Travis Chambers, Marty McDonald, David Etheridge, Nicholas Vandenberg, Keith Cartwright, Ritus Loris, and Michael Matthias. That takes us through the end of August. And then we're planning some really interesting discussions for Season 4, if you can believe it, of Confessions of a Marketer. As always, and as I always say, stay with us. Lots of fun in store. Okay, on to Ian David. Ian has worked with a variety of the biggest brands in the world as a copywriter and creative director. A couple of years ago, he found himself out of work and was sending out resumes everywhere and got little response. He realized that it was because ad agencies are obsessed with youth. So after some thought, he created Fearless, a network of freelance ad talent dedicated to helping ambitious clients achieve outrageous goals. On his website for Fearless, he says, ad agencies are obsessed with youth. We're obsessed with talent. We have a chat about his background, the underpinnings of Fearless and Ageless Creativity, and how he's organizing Fearless, what success looks like, also how he sees the need for big thinking increasing as we hopefully emerge from the COVID lockdown sometime soon. There's a lot more too. If you're of a certain age, well, really if you're of any age, this is an important discussion. Let's get to it. Ian, it's great to have you on. I think this is a really important topic. Can you give me your background and tell me about Ageless Creativity and Fearless?
Yes, I am a copywriter and creative director. I've been in the biz for about 30 years. I got downsized out of an agency I'd been with for 20 years in the Southeast about a year and a half ago, and I became a freelancer, essentially. And I was getting a certain degree of work, but I kind of felt like I was kind of not really operating at my full potential. Yeah. So a lot of my peers around me were in the same position. They'd got to a certain point in their life, a certain point in their careers, certain age, and they were finding doors close to them. They felt that they had still a lot to offer and were just kind of feeling a bit ostracized. So I set Fearless up. After a while, I kind of got a sense that I was freelancing, but I was still looking for work in terms of like a full-time employ. And I must have written 300 to 400 letters or email things to various organizations, big companies, big agencies, small agencies, middle-sized agencies, agencies near where I lived, agencies in New York, agencies in London, agencies everywhere. Yeah. And I wasn't getting anything. I mean, I thought myself, I should be getting something. I'm not the most awarded creative in the entire world, but I'm not the worst. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. You know what I'm saying? I should be getting some kind of response to some of these things. Out of 300, you think, well, if I got 30, that would be reasonable. But given the market, very competitive, there's a lot of good people out there, but I wasn't getting anything. So I kind of sensed that there was something else going on. And rightly or wrongly, I kind of concluded that there must be some degree of agency going on here. So eventually, I'd been thinking about other things at the same time. There was a whole bunch of thoughts in my mind about working with the people I know. The kind of work I was getting was basically all based around copy. But I thought myself, if someone, brand or client or someone I knew, came to me and asked for something bigger, if they came to me and asked for perhaps a multi-channel campaign that worked across social, outdoor, TV, radio, I could do it. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it all myself, but I could pull together the necessary players to make it happen. Same with a brand values campaign. If a company wanted to articulate who they were, who they are, what they stood for, and do it in a way that could make it manifest, I could do that. There's certain components that I could write myself or execute myself, and anything I couldn't do or didn't feel comfortable doing, I could pull in other people. So that's where the idea of like harnessing all the people I know that have gathered together close to me over the course of a 30-year career, started to kind of float to the top of my head kind of thing. So basically, after a while, I got kind of fed up with the whole thing, and I decided to do something about it. So that's when I formed Fearless at the start of the year. So Fearless is essentially an international network of freelance talent. Everyone's experienced, everyone's proven, and everyone's essentially a badass at what they do. They're ageless. And that's the thing about it, is ageless. We don't care if you're in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, or 60s. If you're good at what you do, you're on the team. The idea is we've got a website and guys can come to us and with an assignment, a project. And then we assign the work based on the need, the skill sets required, the budget. And originally I was thinking about location, but the more I think about it, the location is not necessarily mandatory. I was thinking about building out these units across the country and across the globe, where you just kind of activate them when the project comes in.
Yeah.
And originally it was going to be also based on location, but I'm not quite sure if that is quite as necessary as I thought it was. The process of creating the work and executing the work and the payment of the work for the work done would work like any other agency, only that we're not an agency. We're more like an ad network.
Yeah. A collective almost.
Yeah. So that was essentially how the whole thing got started.
So can we try and diagnose the problem?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think ageism is so prevalent? I'm about your age, and I spent my entire career trying to gain experience. And I have perspective of decades of experience. And yet in some businesses, that's not really valued.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is?
Well, advertising is a strange beast, really, because things that are prevalent in advertising are not prevalent in other industries. Like it's not prevalent in the movie industry, for instance, or it's not prevalent, if you're a lawyer, the older you get, the more revered you are. Whereas in advertising, the older you get, the less revered you are. It seems, for the most part anyway. Ad agencies tend to be youth obsessed. The average age of an advertising agency employee is around 35.
Right.
And only 6% of the entire workforce is over 50. So. And, yes, there are people in their 40s working in some of these larger shops. And I imagine they are always looking over their shoulder. Kind of, somebody get to 50, the game is kind of up to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And, if they are older and still working in the enterprise, they probably tend to be high up in the machine kind of thing. So in terms of the people actually doing the work, then that it really is folks in their 20s and 30s,
Yeah.
And as a consequence, the perspective, you mentioned perspective earlier, the perspective that those younger people bring to the business is valid, but it is limited. We, on the other hand, as we pride ourselves on being ageless, so we can draw on talent across the entire spectrum.
Yeah.
From 22 to 60, so we're wide and deep, where perhaps an advertising agency is more shallow and narrow,
Yeah.
So that is one of the, and also, like I said, advertising has got this kind of image of being all about the new and the now. There's that famous line about being digitally native, which was kind of like that catch-all buzzword that kind of basically said if you're over 40, you just don't get digital. It's just too much for you.
Right.
Which kind of just drove me mad because, digital, yes, advertising is always changing. It's not like if it was in the 60s or the late 50s, it was TV. If it was in the, if it was in the 80s and the 90s, it was the desktop computer was coming in, and, the days of pasting up ads on boards suddenly went out the window. But that's not to say that people can't adapt or don't understand it. So I kind of always found that that always kind of really rubbed me up the wrong way. Digital it's got a lot of great components to it, but it's essentially a channel. It's not necessarily a creative discipline. I always think that there are certain creative aspects to it, but I think the fallacy sometimes with the people who are completely obsessed with all things digital is that they think that its capacity to drop an ad to the right person at the right time on the right device is great, but sometimes I think they fall into the fallacy of thinking that's all you need to do. And that's why you see some of the digital work that kind of drives perhaps older people bonkers, is because some of the work is just really miserable. And to me, digital being a channel, it means that's like any other media. It's like getting the right person in the right spot at the right time is half the battle.
Yeah.
Once you've bought that right or earned that right, you still have to create something that's going to grab their attention or jump out at them or make them laugh or make them or shock them or make them reconsider a position kind of thing. So again, that's a different perspective on the way things are, how things work, and why they work. Kind of thing.
Yeah, it's digital, but there's an analog human being still looking at it at the other end, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So tell me about how Fearless actually works. Is it from a client perspective and from a participant in your network? How does it work?
Well, original idea. I mean, obviously we have a website, just like any advertising entity, where you can reach out, you can email, you can call, and then the work will come in. The way I see it is, all the work would come into a central hub, and we'll take on the assignment. We'll gather our core team together, and then we'll just assess its need, what it requires, the right players we can assign to it, what the budget is for the entire project. So that may mean we could put more than one team on the project. And like I say, perhaps originally I was thinking about location. So they do. Does the client? This was in January, so things have changed now.
Yeah.
Does the client require FaceTime? Like a face-to-face component to it.
Yeah.
So if we're based in the Southeast, and we get a call that's from a client in Denver, do we need to put a Denver team on it? Originally I was thinking that there may be a need to, like, if when you come to actually present the work, or there may need to be a component to it where there's actually people on the ground that can actually liaise with the client, whether it's a project manager, creative themselves. So, and then basically that's how it works. And now the thing is, the project is now I'm thinking that there may be almost like pods across the country and across the world kind of thing. So there may be like a New York pod, or Portland pod, or San Francisco pod, Atlanta pod. So there could be more points of entry than just the website kind of thing,
Right.
And then that would give the people that are designated to be to head them up, that would give them a little bit more autonomy, feel more connected to the whole idea, just make them more invested in it kind of thing. And I really do. My thinking is that I do want it to be as autonomous as possible, because, the thinking is obviously these people I'm going to be embracing with this and bringing in closer to the center of the whole idea are going to be people who know what they're doing,
Yeah.
And so there's going to be an element to it, what I call fire and forget, which means you can give them something to do and you don't have to sort of fret about it and thinking, well, I wonder how that's going. You'd be able to set a creative team of a project, say, let's look at some ideas in 10 days. And then when 10 days later, you come back and say, yeah, we've got some stuff here that's great. This is going to work. So you lay out your stall basically saying, here's a network full of experienced people. Okay, well, experienced people should know what they do, and you can trust them, and you can give them a certain amount of autonomy. You can let them get on with it, kind of thing. Obviously, there may be a little bit of oversight from the central hub of the Fearless central hub, but once the project is assigned and set in motion, I want to give the people in charge of it as much. I want to let them run with it. Basically, is the idea.
Yeah. So I was going to ask, why is it right for the times we live in? And boy, when you say the times we live in, we're recording in early May of 2020, and we're in the COVID era, right? And it seems to me that this concept, this idea of having a virtual team that you can apply to a client problem, is ideal for the times we live in. But what's the opportunity, and what's your feeling on why it's right for the times we're in?
Well, two things really. When I launched this idea in January, which is, seems like forever now.
Yeah, it's like 20 years ago.
That's right. When I launched it in January, literally the first week of January, I kind of put the first post up on LinkedIn. And, the idea of an international network of remote creative talent, the idea of launching that back in January, I had no idea that come April, the entire world and its spouse will be working from home on a sofa in a dens, trying to, get to grips with the various video conference capacities, So, but the idea of Fearless is always that, we're working from home. It's our thing. It's part of our DNA. It's part of the idea, And if it's not home, it's your coffee shop of choice, just around the corner, where your only overhead is, a cappuccino and a pastry,
Yeah.
So the opportunity, I mean, in the broader sense, the ad business has been kind of a bit up in the air for a while now. In terms of the big companies have been struggling to get to grips with how to be flexible enough and mobile enough, and they're always, when it does come to hard times, it's always the more expensive the middle meat of the agency is always the one that gets cut first because they're the most expensive, and there's not enough. I don't think there's enough value placed on what they have, you know. So for me, the opportunity would be, could be a chance for us to reset, you know, to seize the moment when everything has been questioned and is open to question, like the why we do what we do, and turn it into like, what if we did it like this, you know? So when the all clear sounds, if it ever does, and whatever kind of new normal we eventually merge into, I think what passes for communication methods, you know, what have passed for marketing norms 6 months ago, I'm not sure if they're going to cut it anymore. There's going to be a need for some serious big ideas. I think there's going to be a lot of brands and products and services that are going to merge out on the other side of this crisis in a big hole.
Yeah.
Their brand's going to be shattered. Their market's going to be all over the place. There's going to be marketing. There's going to be CMOs kind of coming back into the workforce, thinking, "My God, how am I going to rescue this brand that I'm normally in charge of?" They're going to have less resources to do it. They're going to have less budget to do it, and they're probably going to have less players on their team to do it. You know, so and the need is going to be for, I think, big thinking is going to be required more than ever. And by big thinking, I mean like the ability to think laterally. It's not going to be, I think that going back to what you were doing prior to COVID is not going to be enough. The need is going to be so great that they're going to have to think, we're going to actually really have to kickstart this entire business. And we're going to need some huge ideas to be able to do that, you know. So, and it's going to take many things. It's going to take courage to do that, you know, because you're going to have to step outside of your comfort zone and embrace ideas and methods and peaceful thinking that is going to be perhaps a little bit more aggressive than it has been in the past, or just more overtly after grabbing market share kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I think things were kind of, for some industries and some categories, things were kind of comfortable before COVID. You know, I always think of the car advertising. You know, I'm not saying this is going to sound like a generalization, because there's always great work floating out there. But in general, car advertisers kind of been in the doldrums when you consider the legacy work from the past kind of thing. And I just think it was also, it's almost like, you know, certain brands, they have their own center of gravity to a certain extent. They've got to sell products regardless, you know.
Right.
They would have done.
Yeah, the most exciting car company doesn't even advertise, Tesla, right?
Right. I kind of felt that there was a certain case of some of those products were selling almost like despite the advertising, not because of the advertising. You know, like because it was so innocuous. Like anything that was all about the experience. Think of how many car spots have you seen in recent times? And I won't mention any names, but I could have wanted to. Where, you know, the spot starts off with a implausibly young person driving a possibly expensive car through an urban landscape. They get frustrated by it and they take a side road out of the city, and before you know it, they're up in the mountains, or they're down at the beach, or they're engaging with nature. And basically the line is, you know, experience the all new XYZ from whatever, you know.
Again, and I want to ask you what success looks like. What is it? You know, we come out of lockdown. We're, you know, a year, 2 years down the road. What does success look like for Fearless?
Well, I think, if we can be viable present ourselves as a viable alternative to the traditional advertising agency, if we can make that work, it's a pretty ambitious idea. I'm not saying it's like a completely original thought. I'm sure there's kind of networky kind of operations already existing, but this is a big piece of thinking. And if we can make it viable, because there's a lot of things going for it in terms of, like, you know, the idea we assign just what you need and not what you know when you don't need kind of thing. So it's going to be pretty lean, pretty mean. But the idea of the work will be pretty fearless as well. There's going to be the philosophy that we call it is pretty much, is the idea is, you know, be seen or die kind of thing. And obviously the overheads are going to be far, far less than the traditional agency network. But if we can get it up as a viable alternative to a traditional advertising agency, I'll be happy. That'll be success. But also, if we can change hearts and minds within the agencies themselves, you know, I don't think advertising agencies are going to change their youth-obsessed biases anytime soon. And they're not going to do it of their own volition. I think they're going to have to be forced to. And I think entities like Fearless may make them stop and take note and maybe just readjust their thinking, their culture, who they employ and why they employ them, kind of thing. I also think that the clients themselves have got a big role to play, because I think they are in terms of changing advertising agency culture. I think when they start to demand to see more diversity, not obviously in race and gender, but in age as well. When they start to question, why am I only seeing people in their 20s and 30s in my meetings? Why am I not seeing, especially when, the average age of the typical consumer is getting older by the month, by the year kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when the over 50 market is the most lucrative market and it counts for almost like 6% of all consumer spending, why am I only seeing people in their 20s and 30s? I'm not saying there's no validity to having young people in the mix. So of course, they're vitally important, but not to the exclusion of everybody else.
Right.
So if we can, even if we kind of stimulate the debate enough for that to change, then I would count that as a success as well, because that is the reason I kind of launched this whole idea in the first place, was to just ruffle a few feathers and disrupt a few things with that. So if I can get people thinking in those terms, then I would count that as a success as well.
Well, you've certainly already prompted debate, and I think it is a societal thing that we need to discuss out in the open, because ageism is an issue that we see in pretty much every sector of society. And I think you've done your part to get the debate going in the ad business.
Well, thank you. Yes, because like I said, to me, it's always the same people that get the chop first as well. Like we just obviously the last couple of weeks, we've seen all the major shops, all the major multinationals hacking away at their staff. And it's been pretty brutal. As cullings go, it's been this last 3 or 4 weeks has been pretty flipping brutal. And it's probably going to be across the board, but you just know that it's that middle tier, the rich, experienced, proven tier that's ultimately more expensive, that's going to be the one that's going to be hit the hardest. So there's going to be even more great, creative and strategic talent on the market that's still got a lot to give. Is still hungry, still loves basically what they do. That's what I keep getting back from.
Yeah.
Like I said, when I put some of these things out on LinkedIn, I was overwhelmed by response. And some people just, want to connect. Some people would want to connect and they'll put a short note saying, how can I be a part of this? I love it. And others would write back pretty long notes, almost like a cathartic kind of like, man, thank you for saying this. I am the target audience for this. I'm exactly what you're talking about. I feel like I'm at the top of my game, but all these doors are shut or closed to me now. It's very frustrating. That would be there's a lot of more people on the market, and I basically welcome everybody.
Yeah.
Again, the criteria is if you're good, you're in. And it's copywriters, it's art directors, project managers, it's client services directors, it's producers, directors, photographers, editors, anyone. The entire gamut of the process is what I want to invite and offer to clients. It's like from soup to nuts, essentially. You can come to us with a need, an assignment, a mission, and we can take it all the way through to final execution.
Yeah.
So it's pretty ambitious, but, that's the idea.
Yeah. Well, it's a great idea, and I wish you nothing but the best, nothing but success. Thanks for joining me, and it was a great discussion.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on.
All right, next time, Naira Perez on Instagram Stories. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2020. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. Stay healthy, and see you next time.